That's really good news that God knows, huh?
Yeah.
Because what the heck do we know, right? I just want to extend my gratitude. This is a month of gratitude, but last Sunday was a real risky thing from here to be able to share with you that I had going through a period of spiritual drought, I guess you would say, a spiritual dormancy, with with a lack of inspiration and a feeling of feeling empty and just not feeling inspired, and that's just fine for every for the average person, but if you're a spiritual teacher, then that puts you in a vulnerable place. And the choices that I had was either to get up here and fake it, which is a strong word, but I mean essentially. I don't have any trouble after doing this for 25 years of putting some words together and some stories and some illustrations and principles and make you, from your end, experience a reasonably cogent message. However, on my shadow card, and we haven't talked about what that is here yet, but just know that we all have a shadow, right? Those parts of us that we want to keep hidden, that we're not very proud of, we usually, don't bring those out, for best company. We reserve those for when we're triggered, right? When something triggers us. And on my shadow card is, amongst other things, I'm a fake. I'm a fake. So when I act that way, I am acting from my shadow. And there is a lot of self-recrimination that goes with those moments when I know I'm not being honest, when I'm just sort of, getting by with a message. And that morning, so last Sunday morning, and as I was driving here, I was dancing with the option of either just putting something together on the fly that would have been probably okay, or just being honest with you as to where I was. And so I just really want to thank you for the grace that you gave me for allowing me to be honest and not to activate my shadow, which would have been quite unpleasant. And I'm sure it would not have landed with any real sense of wholehearted conviction, which would always be my intention when I'm sharing a message. So 6 days later, yesterday, I'm doing this process, getting ready for today, and I'm feeling about the same way. So, it just, it has a life of its own, this spiritual journey. And I do really believe that I'm on the cusp of another level of understanding, a deeper level of understanding. But what goes with that is generally that something has to go in order for this higher understanding to emerge. You can't put two things in the same place at the same time. There has to be, something has to be released. And I think that what's happened for me is that I've been doing a lot of meditation, I've been doing a lot of inner work, and I've been trying to be equally honest with myself as to when I am seeing myself as a real spiritual being, what we truly are, versus the times when I'm just sort of, acting from who I think I am, my identity, even like being a minister. And that whole thing is fraught with all kinds of baggage. And I mean, you all have played roles in your life, and that role could be husband, wife, mother, father, sister, brother, teacher, barber, bus driver, doctor, lawyer, candlestick maker, whatever your role is in life. Those roles can move into your sense of being. They can co-opt your actual identity. And if you are serious on this spiritual path, you know that anything that is a substitute for who you really are, when it begins to sort of move in and take over your identity, there is a real incongruous disconnect experience. It's very uncomfortable. And part of you, your higher self, whatever you want to call it, knows that you need to release that identity. You don't need to release the role you play, but you need to release the identification with it. And that is a grief. Because especially if we see this with people who have kids that leave home, the empty nest syndrome, where you've identified yourself as a mother or a father, a caregiver, whatever, all these years, and now that's gone. Now who are you? Well, you've never stopped being a child of God. You've never stopped being a spiritual being. But because your identity went into that role you were playing, when you release that role or attempt to release that role, there's a feeling of emptiness. There's a feeling of, I don't know who I am without this, because we have given over our sense of self to our doing and lost our sense of being. Does this make sense? So I've been trying to analyze this so that it wouldn't be just me coming up here and saying, well, here I am again with nothing to say. But it actually has value if we see this as part and parcel of the spiritual path, and that it is actually for you, it isn't against you. Because anything that takes you closer to the truth of who and what you are is advantageous if your intention is to awaken spiritually, yes? So when we know that this is part of the process that would be God's will for your awakening, then we can embrace it and not see it as something which can diminish us. It in fact expands our sense of being to our original nature. So that's what I want to talk to you about today. The God Knows is the title, but I never really know, because I don't script these kind of talks. I just kind of go. I have a few notes here just to remind me of something I might want to say. So, and I wrote down this quote from Mark Twain, which I'm sure you've heard before. He said, "It ain't what you don't know that gets you into trouble." You know the rest of it? It's what you know that ain't so. Yeah? So that's really kind of grabs it, It's that if you think that you are your job, or you think you are some level of financial security, or whatever it is that is something that is added unto you, a spiritual being, then that's what gets us into trouble. Because when we identify with who we are not, we inevitably suffer, because who we are not is vulnerable in the world, right? You can lose a job, you can lose money, people can, even if you see yourself as in a relationship, that relationship can change, and then how do you manage? So our goal as spiritual beings is to come back to our original nature, to remember who and what we truly are, and that movement or that intentionality around waking up to who and what we are involves the letting go of who we're not. And that can be the sort of the dark side of our spiritual path. Not that it's wrong, not that it's bad, not that it should be resisted or pushed away, but we can experience it as with negative emotions, because what? We want to be happy, right? We want to be happy all the time. But if we're interested in sort of a fleeting happiness, then we can pursue distractions for our happiness, and we can pursue substances or relationships, or even entertain thoughts and feelings and even affirmations just to make ourselves feel better. But just feeling better, if it's a temporary, fleeting happiness, that's really not what you and I came for. You and I came here to awaken to who and what we truly are. And that is the kind of happiness that we're after. That is the lasting and the abiding sense of well-being that is at the heart of us. And it does require us letting go of what ain't so, letting go of who we're not. I was thinking this week also about an experience I had with a labyrinth walk. You all know what a labyrinth is? Probably most of you have walked on a labyrinth. And the instructions for a labyrinth, as you enter the labyrinth, is that they recommend that you have an intention so that you don't just walk blindly or mindlessly, but that you walk with an intention. So the idea of that is that the walking in this sort of circuitous path that you have to follow to finally get into the center does not reveal the way you have to go when you first enter. In fact, when you start, you might glance ahead and see where the path will lead you, but there'll be a switchback and it'll go in another direction. And you can't see from the beginning of the labyrinth entrance how you're going to get into the center. You'll kind of drive yourself crazy trying to do it. So that's the metaphor for the spiritual path or the spiritual life, is that we don't know exactly how we're going to get into that experience of wholeness and self-worth and peace and love that we know that is our spiritual destiny to get there. I mean, we've heard this from every spiritual master, right? That there is the kingdom of God, Jesus said, is right here, right now, and it's within you. So how do we follow this unseeable, unknowable path? And the only way that we can do it is by starting with the assumption that there is heaven, that there is the promised land, there is the kingdom of God, there is the realization of our true nature, that's a fact, and we can do that just by leaning into the faith of those who we trust, right? Whoever spiritual being that you want, that you believe. And then our part is faith. It's faith. We can't see how we're going to get there. So we just take the step in the direction that is in front of us. And we follow faithfully, one step at a time, trusting that eventually we will get there. And so we have to live with a certain level of doubt. But it is a faithful doubt. It's not the clear, defined path that our ego or our personal little self would like. But it is absolutely necessary for us to abandon that need for certainty. Otherwise, we won't take any steps in the direction of our awakening. And so there is something for us to do, and we're not going to be given clear instructions. That's just the nature of the spiritual life. So living with a certain amount of uncertainty, buoyed by a sense of faith that there is a reality, there is a truth, that we are not, as Jesus said, I will not leave you comfortless. This place that I am in, you too shall go there, because you also are cut from the same cloth. That is the reality. And so this journey that you and I are on it seems like a contradiction. It's like, I am supposed to be fully faithful and disciplined on this path, and yet I'm not given any assurances other than the promises or the affirmations of those who have arrived. So I want to share one more little metaphor with you. I don't know if I've done this before or not. Have I talked to you about John Smith and King Lear? Not familiar? Oh, okay, good. I really like this one. It comes from a spiritual teacher, Rupert Spira. And the story is this, is that John Smith is a Shakespearean actor. And he lives at home alone, and he's not married and has no kids. So he's pretty much happy all the time. And peaceful, I'll say that. He lives this very peaceful life, all is well. Then at night he goes to the theater and he puts on the costume to play King Lear. and he performs, and when the play is over, he goes backstage in the green room, and his friend, who had been in the audience watching him, comes to visit him, and he finds John Smith is very sad and grumbling. And his friend says to him, "What's the matter? That was a brilliant performance. Why are you so upset?" And John Smith says, "Well," he says, "my 3 daughters, they betray me, and I can't trust them. And then there's the war with France." And he goes, I don't have a very good English accent, so I won't try to do that. But he just goes into another whole soliloquy of King Lear. And his friend says, "Wait a minute now. Those are not your problems. You were portraying King Lear. You don't have 3 daughters, and you don't have to worry about France. That was all part of the story that you assumed when you assumed the role of King Lear." And he says and his friend says to him, so who are you really? You've lost yourself in this character. And John Smith says, "Well, no," and he begins to talk about his feelings, and these are all the feelings of King Lear. And his friend says, "No, those are feelings. Oh, that's not who you are. That's not your essential nature. That sort of came with this role that you assumed." And he says, "Yeah, but what about," and he tells his thoughts and his strategies and what he's thinking and what he's going to do, and it all has to do, again, with this role he's been playing. His friend says, "No, those are thoughts that are associated with who you're not. You have to remember who you really are, and this will all go away." And so little by little, his friend walks him back in his mind so that he can reclaim this memory of what's essential to him, what is not added unto him. And finally, John Smith says, "Oh, I am John Smith." And as soon as he has that recognition, the suffering comes to an end. And that is the journey that you and I are on. Is that our suffering that we have in life, including what I've been going through lately, is because I have been identified with another aspect of myself, but not my true self. But I've been identified with my ego, with my thoughts and feelings, with my concerns about my future, with my concerns about money and health and all these things that are all part of the human scene. And I have been recognizing that I have gone into that role, and I have assumed that is my reality. And seeing that, I have seen that what I need to do is to let that go. I need to stop believing that that's who and what I am. I need to release that false identity that has me suffering. But there is a suffering with letting go of who you think you are. See? And so, until that we can divest ourselves of the false understanding of who and what we are, until we can fully divest ourselves, there's a grief, there's a pain, there's a fear that we don't know what's on the other side of letting go, do we? I mean, if we could just see this shining light, this angelic presence would be the next iteration of us as we let go of all the false ideals and identifications. We would walk, proudly and strongly and confidently through this labyrinth called the spiritual life. But we don't see that. It's not given to us. We can intuit it. That's usually the best that we can do. We can intuit this deeper sense of who we are, this love, this peace, this essential nature. We can intuit it. And that can be what drives us. In fact, it is the only thing that drives us to to change and to grow and to move and to transform and to go through this discomfort is because our essential nature is pulling us back. It's pulling us back to remember who and what we are. It's the John Smith in the King Lear character that is responsible for him waking up. It isn't so much getting rid of the King Lear, although the King Lear needs to be seen for what it is, but it's really about following the pull of John Smith, following the pull of your essential nature that pulls you back into knowing who you are, and will be the motivation and the means by which you can deal with the discomfort of that letting go process. Because there's nothing more powerful than the truth. And when we can see that, and when we can trust that, it'll keep us in that groove of spiritual intentionality long enough to move through this process. And then if you've got some people that are gathered around you, friends or people on the path with you, that can assure you that this is worth your effort, and to see the Christ in you, to see the divine in you, to know that that is who and what you already are, then this can, what's the word, embolden you to carry on. So, I'm going to do this thing from the Course in Miracles, and if you're not familiar with the Course in Miracles, this is lesson number 79. Does anyone know it? As soon as I start it, I bet you'll get it. Charles, you'll probably get it. Let me recognize the problem so it can be solved. So I'm going to read this. The problem cannot be solved if you do not know what it is. Even if it is really solved already, you will still have the problem because you will not recognize that it has been solved. This is the situation of the world. The problem of separation, which is really the only problem, has already been solved. Our belief that we're separate from God, from truth, from love, from peace, from wholeness. Yet the solution is not recognized because the problem is not recognized. Everyone in the world seems to have his own special problems. Yes? Yet they are all the same and must be recognized as one if the one solution that solves them all is to be accepted. Who can see that a problem has been solved if he thinks the problem is something else? Even if he is given the answer, he cannot see its relevance. This is John Smith. This is King Lear. John Smith forgetting who he is. And he's living in this illusion. And so all of the illusions that come with being King Lear, all of the accoutrements that cause his suffering, are stuck to him while he's thinking that he's King Lear. And the one problem is his feeling separate from his true self. Yeah? That is the position in which you find yourself now. You have the answer, but you are still uncertain about what the problem is. It's like someone telling you, God loves you. And you go, oh yeah, yeah. But you don't realize that you've separated from the love that is God. In other words, that's the part that we play on the spiritual path, is finding our way back and seeing through the illusion, seeing through the false. The temptation to regard problems as many is the temptation to keep the problem of separation unsolved. It's like, oh, I got this, my money and my health, and I've got all these problems. But none of those are really problems if we are identified and we know our true nature. Because when we are identified as our true nature, we feel invulnerable to the travails of the world. We don't ignore them, they're still there, but we don't suffer because it doesn't feel like it can really touch the essence of us. No one could solve all the problems the world appears to hold, They seem to be on so many levels in such varying forms and with such varied content that they confront you with an impossible situation. Dismay and depression are inevitable as you regard them. All this complexity is but a desperate attempt not to recognize the problem and therefore not to let it be resolved. If you could recognize that your only problem is separation, no matter what form it takes, you could accept the answer because you would see its relevance. Perceiving the underlying constancy in all the problems seems to confront you. You would understand that you have the means to solve them all. And you would use that means because you recognize the problem. So that's been helpful to me, and I hope to you if you find yourself in that place, which you will. If not today, it's just the way it is, and it's not against us. I think that's what I love about unity, I think the most, is that unity, especially in its sort of, I think, more psychologically evolved iteration, which is more recent, like last 20, 30 years or so, has recognized that the truth is not enough unless there's a recognition of what we hold to be false, that becomes the work that we have to do on the spiritual path. We have to deal with the false. We have to see what's false. What we have been holding to be true that is not true is where the problem is. It isn't that we need more God in our life, that the Spirit needs to be more resolute in making itself known through us. It is always doing that. The tension that we feel or the lack that we feel is us overlooking the truth of our being by being attached to some perspective of who we think we are, what we think the world is, and where we think God is out there somewhere apart from us. That's what causes you and I to feel bereft of inspiration and love and peace and joy. It isn't because there isn't enough God in our life. It's because we have erected false gods and we worship them and they constantly disappoint us. Everything in the world, like Jesus said, it all wears out. It rusts or, it's not going to be there for you. So if we're putting our faith in our partner or putting our faith in money or in a job or a career or anything that is part of this world, it is not going to give us the essential, everlasting, ever-present peace, love, and happiness that we're seeking. We have to begin to separate ourselves, at least from those notions. And then as we do that, we make space in our heart and in our mind for the truth of us to be made known. And that then becomes our salvation. That becomes the liberation that we're seeking, and the peace and the happiness that is at the heart of us is not being withheld from us. We don't need to pray to God for any more love and peace and joy. We need to pray for the courage to let go of what isn't so. That is the work that we need to do. And when we let go of what's not so, then we are space and we are capacity for truth. Yes? Yeah. Good. So we're gonna play this little video now because this is supposed to be on gratitude, and it got diverted because of my multicursive pathway through life. And this is David Stendhal Roth's beautiful video on this is a great, it's called This Is a Good Day. And it really reminds us of how to open our eyes to all the good and the things for which we can be grateful for. And again, I am grateful for you. I'm grateful to be able to stand here and be shamelessly honest and to know that that if I can do this in front of you, and then you can do this in your own life, and then we get more honest, and we provide more encouragement for each other to do this work without feeling ashamed that we're not further along, because that'll just ruin a perfectly good day. But this is how we can have a really good day. So let's roll it.
You think this is just another day in your life? It's not just another day. It's the one day that is given to you today. It's given to you. It's a gift. It's the only gift that you have right now. And the only appropriate response is gratefulness. If you do nothing else but to cultivate that response to the great gift that this unique day is, if you learn to respond as if it were the first day in your life and the very last day, then you will have spent this day very well. Look at the faces of people whom you meet. Each one has an incredible story behind their face. A story that you could never fully fathom. Not only their own story, but the story of their ancestors. We all go back so far. And in this present moment, on this day, all the people you meet, all that life from generations and from so many places all over the world flows together and meets you here like a life-giving water if you only open your heart and drink. So these are just a few of an enormous number of gifts to which we can open your heart. And so I wish you that you will open your heart to all these blessings and let them flow through you, that everyone whom you will meet on this day will be blessed by you. Just by your eyes, by your smile, by your touch, just by your presence. Let the gratefulness overflow into blessing all around you. And then it will really be a good day.